Rome, a city that was never supposed to last. It began with a myth, two abandoned twins raised by a wolf. It burned, it rebuilt, it conquered, it divided, and it collapsed. And yet, 2,000 years later, we still live in its shadow. Our laws, our languages, our calendars, our governments, all are written with the fingerprints of Rome. But the true story of Rome isn't just emperors in marble or legions in gleaming armor. It's a story of betrayal and ambition, of tyrants and visionaries, of collapse and rebirth. And it begins not with an empire, but with a single act of blood. If you're new here, you're right on time. Hit subscribe, and let's uncover what was buried. The myth of the beginning. Before there was Rome, there was a river. The legend tells us of two brothers, Romulus and Remus. Abandoned as infants, they were set adrift on the Tiber River, left to die. But fate had other plans. A she-wolf discovered them, nursed them, and raised them until a shepherd took them in. As they grew, so did their ambitions. Together, they dreamed of founding a city. But ambition always breeds rivalry. And when the brothers clashed over who would rule, Romulus struck down his twin in a moment of fury. Blood sealed the foundation. Rome was born in betrayal. But was this history or propaganda? Archaeologists tell us the story of Romulus and Remus is more myth than fact, a tale invented by Romans to prove their destiny was divine, to justify power with a story of fate. And yet, there's a chilling truth. Rome really did rise on violence. From its very beginning, power was taken, not given, a pattern that would repeat for centuries. Kings, tyrants, and the birth of the Republic. Rome's first centuries were ruled by kings. 7 of them, if the records can be trusted. Some were wise builders, like Numa Pompilius, who gave Rome its laws and sacred rites. Others were warriors who expanded its reach. But the last king, Tarquin the Proud, would be remembered for something darker. A tyrant, arrogant, cruel. According to legend, it was an unspeakable crime by a son against a noble woman that finally sparked revolt. Outrage spread and the people rose. The kings were overthrown. The monarchy was abolished. And in its place, Rome birthed something radical, a republic. A government where no one man could ever again claim to be king. Instead, 2 consuls would share power. A senate of elders would guide decisions. Power would be checked, balanced, and shared, at least in theory. Because as Rome grew stronger, so did the ambitions of the men within it. The Republic was born to end tyranny, but it would one day breed tyrants more powerful than any king. Rome's new republic had one problem: survival. Surrounded by enemies, it was a city with no guarantee of tomorrow. And to secure its place, Rome would march to war again and again until the entire Mediterranean trembled at its name. The Republic at war. Rome was free, but freedom is fragile when you're surrounded by enemies. The young Republic had to fight for its survival. First against the Etruscans, then the Samnites, and then, in the wars that would define its destiny, against Carthage. Carthage was no ordinary rival. It was wealthy, powerful, and commanded the seas. The clash between Rome and Carthage became known as the Punic Wars, and they would decide who ruled the Mediterranean. And then came Hannibal. The Carthaginian general shocked the world when he marched an army, including war elephants, across the Alps. No one thought it possible. Snow, cliffs, and Roman ambushes should have destroyed him. But Hannibal made it through. At Cannae, he encircled and annihilated an entire Roman army. 60,000 Romans fell in a single day. The Republic trembled. But Rome did not surrender. That was Rome's secret. They could lose battles, but they refused to lose wars. Decade after decade, Rome rebuilt, rearmed, and struck back. Finally, in 146 BC, Carthage was destroyed, burned to the ground. Its fields salted so nothing would ever grow again. Rome now ruled the Mediterranean. But victory came with a price. Wealth, slaves, and territory flooded into the Republic. And with it came corruption, greed, and ambition. The seeds of collapse were already being sown. The rise of dictators. Rome's Senate was supposed to guard against tyranny. But power has a way of bending rules. First came the Gracchi brothers, who tried to reform Rome, and were murdered for it. Then came generals like Marius and Sulla, who marched armies into Rome itself. Civil war erupted. Rome's laws were no longer sacred. Power belonged to whoever held the sword. And then Julius Caesar. Brilliant, ruthless, ambitious. He conquered Gaul, brought unimaginable wealth to Rome, and earned the love of the people. But the Senate feared him. When they ordered him to disband his army, Caesar made a choice that would change history forever. He crossed the Rubicon River, a direct act of treason. By doing so, he declared war on the Republic itself. Civil war erupted again, and Caesar emerged victorious. He declared himself dictator for life. Rome, once so proud of its republic, now had a king in everything but name. But power breeds enemies. On the Ides of March, 44 BC, Caesar entered the Senate. Senators he thought were allies turned on him. Knives flashed. Caesar fell beneath the statue of Pompey, the very man he had defeated. With his blood, the Republic died. But Rome did not find peace. Instead, the killing of Caesar unleashed chaos. Civil war returned, more brutal than ever. And in the ashes of that war, a new figure rose. The empire begins. Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. A man who would soon be known as Augustus. He played his rivals against each other, outmaneuvering Mark Antony and Cleopatra, crushing them at the Battle of Actium. With his enemies gone, Octavian claimed supreme power. But he was clever. He didn't call himself king. Instead, he called himself Princeps, the first citizen. He claimed to restore the Republic, even as he quietly kept all the power for himself. The Senate, exhausted from decades of war, accepted him. The people adore him. Rome was no longer a republic. It was an empire. And for the first time in centuries, peace reigned. This was the Pax Romana, 200 years of stability, wealth, and glory. Roads stretched from Britain to the deserts of Arabia. Roman law and architecture spread across the world. But the peace came at a cost. Behind the marble and glory, Rome's emperors held absolute power. And some would rule with wisdom, while others would descend into madness. Rome had conquered the world, but it could not conquer itself, because the same city that produced Augustus also gave rise to emperors who burned it, who bathed in blood, and who nearly destroyed the empire from within. Fire, madness, and glory. The empire Augustus built was magnificent, but it was fragile because it depended entirely on the character of whoever wore the crown. Rome's emperors were supposed to be guardians of the Pax Romana. Instead, some of them became monsters. Take Caligula. He began his reign beloved, but power corroded him. He declared himself a living god. He appointed his horse to a position of consul. He executed senators on a whim, laughing as Rome's elite trembled. Then came Nero, a man whose name still echoes through history. When a fire consumed Rome in 64 AD, rumors spread that Nero himself had set it, and that he sang while the city burned. Whether true or not, he found someone else to blame: the Christians. The persecutions that followed were brutal. Christians were burned as human torches to light Nero's gardens. They were thrown to wild beasts in the Colosseum. The faith of the early church was tested in fire and blood. And yet, even as emperors raged, Rome also built wonders. The Colosseum rose, a marvel of engineering, capable of holding 50,000 people. Gladiators fought, animals roared, and the crowd cheered as Rome displayed its power in stone and spectacle. Aqueducts carried fresh water into cities. Roads stitched the empire together. Temples, baths, and forums turned Rome into the beating heart of civilization. Rome's greatness and Rome's madness existed side by side. One moment, an emperor built golden palaces. The next, he plunged the empire into chaos. The glory of Rome was dazzling, but the cracks were already forming. Christianity versus the empire. What Rome didn't know was that in persecuting Christianity, it was planting the seeds of its own transformation. The faith refused to die. The more Christians were killed, the faster their numbers grew. Their message spread, not through swords, but through conviction, through hope of eternal life, through the story of a crucified carpenter who had risen from the dead. At first, Christianity was seen as a threat to Roman order. After all, Christians refused to worship the emperor. But by the 4th century, something unthinkable happened. An emperor himself converted. Constantine, before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, claimed to have seen a vision in the sky, a cross with the words, "In this sign, conquer." He marched into battle with the Christian symbol painted on his soldiers' shields, and he won. In 313 AD, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, legalizing Christianity. Persecution ended. Churches were built, and the faith that had once been outlawed now rose to the very center of imperial power. By the end of the century, Christianity was no longer just tolerated, it was the empire's official faith. Rome, which had once crucified Jesus under its law, now bent its knee to him. But this victory came with an irony. While Christianity rose, the empire itself was beginning to fall. The Eternal City thought it could never fall. Its walls were strong, its armies legendary. But enemies were gathering at the gates, corruption was rotting it from within, and the unthinkable was about to happen. Rome, the city of conquest, would itself be conquered. The decline and fall. Rome believed it was eternal. But nothing built by men lasts forever. By the 3rd century AD, the cracks were undeniable. Emperors came and went with dizzying speed, some lasting only months before being overthrown or killed. Civil wars shattered stability. Inflation hollowed the economy. Corruption spread like disease. Meanwhile, enemies pressed in on all sides. The Goths, the Huns, the Vandals, tribes that Rome once mocked as barbarians, began hammering at the empire's borders. Rome's legions, stretched too thin, could not hold them all back. In 410 AD, the impossible happened. Rome was sacked. For the first time in nearly 800 years, an enemy army entered the Eternal City. Citizens wept. How could Rome, mistress of the world, be brought so low? But it wasn't the end. Not yet. For decades, the empire limped on, divided between East and West. The eastern half, centered in Constantinople, would endure. But the western half, it was dying. In 476 AD, the last Western emperor, a boy named Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by a barbarian general. The empire that had once ruled the world was gone. Rome, the city of Romulus, ended with another Romulus. History had come full circle. But if Rome had fallen, why did its shadow still stretch across the world? The legacy of Rome. Rome's body died, but its spirit never did. Roman law shaped Europe. Roman roads became the veins of trade. Roman architecture, domes, arches, aqueducts, inspired every civilization that followed. Its language, Latin, never disappeared. It became the foundation of Italian, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Romanian, the Romance languages. Even English carries Rome in its bones. Its ideas of government, senates, citizenship, checks, and balances were studied by the founding fathers of America. The United States was built with Roman blueprints in mind. And Christianity, once a persecuted faith within Rome, became the faith of billions, its headquarters seated in the very city that once sought to destroy it. In that sense, Rome never truly fell. It was reborn, reshaped, repurposed. The barbarians who toppled it became kings who called themselves heirs of Rome. The church crowned emperors as new Caesars. And every empire since has claimed, in some way, to be Rome's successor. Rome's history wasn't just about Rome. It was about humanity's endless hunger for power, our brilliance in creation, and our blindness in destruction. And maybe that's why the name Rome still haunts us. Because when we look at it, we're not just looking at a city that conquered the world. We're looking in a mirror. The eternal shadow. Rome rose in blood, reigned in glory, and fell in fire. But its shadow still rules us. In our governments, our languages, our roads, and our faith. Rome is in the stones beneath our feet and the words on our lips. The empire is gone, but Rome never really died. If this journey through Rome gave you chills, hit subscribe. This channel is where forgotten history comes alive. Share this with someone who still believes Rome truly fell. Comment below, was Rome's greatest legacy its empire or its collapse? If you felt the weight of history here, drop a like. It helps bring more lost stories to light. Stay with us, because Rome may have fallen, but the next story proves history never really ends.